All right. So, hello, everyone, and welcome to another expert session 125. Today's session is brought to you by Acclaim AI, a voice first global oriented AI platform built for highly regulated industries like banking, fintech, healthcare, and insurance. Where most conversational AI forces a choice between slow human call centers and unpredictable AI agents, Acclaim gives enterprises autonomous voice agents with built in compliance guardrails and full data ownership. So scale doesn't come at the cost of control. Thank you to the Acclaim team for supporting this session. So, what is Evolve? For anyone joining us for the first time, Evolve is a global private network connecting senior operators, founders, advisors, investors, and growth companies across 50 markets. These sessions are practical, not theoretical, real operating experience from people who built, scaled, and rethought their own careers. So, not just talked about it. Today's expert is John Noja. And John, I always start the sessions with a controversial opening question. So the question for you is: you spent years optimizing other people's businesses to hit the number. So why did stepping out of the seat with the most authority uh, feel like the smartest career move you ever made?
Oh, that's a loaded one. Um, Look, I usually don't like to think in like absolutes. I don't think like there's a rule that applies in this case. I really think it's a matter of timing and why this move is like I know it's the best move I've done in my career so far. It's because it was the right timing, because I knew that what I was looking for at this time was different and what fulfills me was different. And I think I had the courage to actually make that choice that is more coming from a personal preference versus a social status or something that sounds nice on a CV or on a dinner table.
Okay, thank you for that. So let's talk about the courage of making that choice, and instead of looking nice, having the courage. And if perhaps we could give a step back. You started your career in consulting. You've
Yeah.
been sharing some amazing content. I'm a big fan. I already told you this in private on both Instagram. And by the way, John has a course that I'm going to release to advisors here in this community. It's in our private network called Mighty Networks. So you've been quite vulnerable sharing your journey. You told a story about you brought your kids to the school that you studied. So let's talk about the beginnings, right? So you are originally from Lebanon,
Yeah.
then built a career in consulting, as you were sharing here, and then you started growing in the ladder. So, if you could take us back then after your studies, how did you end up in consulting? And yeah, let's talk about the origin story.
Yeah. Let's go back 15, 16 years ago. Look, for me, like after, like I did a business school in Paris, and strategy consulting was an obsession for me. Like it was no choice, like I knew that I wanted to do this. I probably applied to every single consulting company that exists in Europe and ended up getting a job at a company called Bearing Point, which mainly operates in Europe, which has a technology arm, which I wasn't part of, and has a management and strategy arm that I was part of. And I was part of the telecom team, but more on the business side than the technical side. And I stayed in consulting for like 6, 7 years between Paris. Then I moved to Dubai. I joined another consultancy company called Strategy and, which is part of the PwC network. And I was living the dream, like I was doing what I was supposed to do, what I always tried to pursue. And if you ask me, if I go back, I would probably do the same. putting aside like what AI is disrupting as like this industry and any other industry, I think I would still do the same because consulting is just like a great school after school, like this is how we call it in the circle, in the space. You learn so much. You change projects and clients very often. So you really start developing that mental agility of switching context very quickly, jumping from a topic to another, talking to very senior people at a very early stage in your career. You develop a lot of soft skills and hard skills. You think properly, you can structure a problem, you can plan properly, you can build beautiful slides, you can present like in a very effective way. And I ticked all these boxes, right? And I was really happy there. But then at some point, and I think this was mainly when like the major milestone in consulting is when you go from like being an associate to an engagement manager and you start managing projects on your own. And this was the inflection point for me where I started asking myself the first set of questions, because for multiple reasons. One, like, I don't know if anyone is familiar with like the lifestyle of a strategy consultant, but it's basically modern slavery. You work in 7 hours a week, a day. You don't sleep basically. You like I used to travel every week for 5 days, so you're always away, living in hotels. You learn a lot, you enjoy what you do on a daily basis, but like it takes a toll on you. So first, like this was like something that's starting to take, because I mean, back then when I started asking these questions, I got married. I started like, to just prioritize different things. But most importantly, I think the big shift happened when I started looking at the partners, and these should be the role models, like these are people I would aspire to become, and they didn't inspire me, to be honest. Their lifestyle didn't inspire me. They were very stressed. They were all like, they have had horrible conditions. Either they're divorced or single or with cancer, or like, I'm exaggerating a bit, but like they didn't have like a very inspiring story for me, at least to associate with, and to kind of, say, I'm going to jump all the remaining ladders to reach there. And the downside of consulting is it's not real. Like, it's not the real world, right? Like, and I think this is what I started missing. I wanted to see, okay, behind these beautiful slides, behind these beautiful stories that you sell, has this project been implemented? Has it been successful? Has the customer enjoyed it? Do you have the chance to kind of reiterate and launch something again? Like, you had no clue, like you just deliver and move on and move on and move on. So I just felt at some point it was a lot of BS, excuse my language. And like I think these were like all the combining factors that made me want to leave consulting at the right time, before I'm stuck in that golden cage, and move into the real world, is how I call it.
Thank you. You see that a common thread in this group here, it's that it's a very international group for the most part. And that's very cool, because what connects us somewhat, it's like maybe people are going to be in their markets, but they work for a multinational, like in their domestic markets, or like Rodrigo worked for internationally, Berenger, so French in the UK. Rebecca has been working across the globe, and she lived abroad as well. So it's amazing, right? And that's the thing that connects us. So Rebecca, before I go to the next question, maybe you have something you'd like to share based on your experience as well, because you traveled. Your story is amazing, and at some point we have to do the expert session. You shared some real golden nuggets with me, and some really amazing things. But perhaps do you have anything that you like to any
So no, I wasn't actually thinking in parallels. I was just more curious, because usually when you hear what I've encountered, a lot of people that have started out as consultants, they will have this reaction to move out and so not try and fix the structures, but basically move away. So I was actually more curious as to your experience, John. So is it a lost cause to fix the structures? Because you're talking about role models. And I think I'm far ahead in this session because my brain just starts ticking, because I know you're going to talk about your executive coaching and stuff like that as well later on. So I'm just, so lack of a better word, running away, moving away instead of looking into fixing the structures, because there's a lot of independent people here. There's a lot of people who took the move out of corporate. So can we fix corporate, and what is it takes? It's a very open question here, but that's basically what happened in my mind while you were talking.
Yeah.
So this is not this is more of a comment than a question, but I'm just a little bit curious. So what drove you to move away instead of saying, okay, should we try and fix this in the context we're in?
Yeah, I'll answer you very quickly, Rebecca. I totally agree with you that like everything is fixable, right? It just like at this stage of my career, I probably did like a more selfish move and a more curious move to say, okay, let me now, I spent a good enough time in consulting, let me go and explore what the other side of the story is. You know, like I used to see my clients as the corporates, and I wanted to see how it looks like on the other side. It's fixable, and I think it's very different by company, right? Like like what I'm sharing is basically the companies I worked at, and these are like big companies, you know, like they're like big structures, multinationals. You're referring to like freelance consulting. I think it's a very different story there, you know, like where you probably the workload is like heavy, but then like I think there's much more independence and much more freedom into how you position yourself also with the client. What I've been seeing, at least because I've been following also like how the industry evolved since, I think there's more and more interest from the companies to have a longer type of commitment where you come in, provide a strategy, provide, you know, a plan, but you still also accompany the clients or the company or the teams you worked with throughout the change, rather than just coming in, doing nice slides and moving on. So it's probably also how the industry is shaping since.
And if I can do an add-on too, because of course we cannot fix structures just one person, but it is fixable. Yeah, maybe, but it's also very built into the way that consultancies work. You're paid, you know, per hour. So, but I'm just a little bit curious, what was your experience then when you made the move from, you know, the consultancy into, as you said, where they do the real work, especially on the level you joined? So did it take a load off you? How did you experience that? And what is the one thing that is important for you to share with anybody sitting here? That you think that they can learn something from?
Yeah, sure. Good question and good transition to the next step. I think this was the best move I've done at this stage, right? Because what I did next, so basically very quickly, I joined as like a country development manager. So it was a big mission to just go and launch OLX in markets that didn't have it from, you know, like at all. And for some reason, that company was looking for ex-consultants, and I kind of ticked the boxes, went through the process, and I got there. And I think I kind of carried with me the whole consultant background, because you do need a lot of structure to be able to like launch a market from scratch, you know. And then if you're not organized enough and you're not thinking clearly, you can be very dispersed, and like your energy can go in many different places. What I enjoyed, like I think this might be a bit, I don't know, controversial. Maybe it's too much of a word, but I enjoyed how schizophrenic these type of jobs are, you know, when you're like in a position of like looking at a very like wide breadth of actions, because in one meeting you could be discussing what's like the 10-year long-term plan of this business that we're launching, and the next meeting you could be discussing which shade of blue is better for that performance marketing campaign that we're launching on Facebook. And I think the spectrum of things that you need to look at is something I enjoyed a lot, because I just felt that, oh, wow, now, you know, like rolling my sleeves and I'm deep diving into like the actual thing. One anecdote I always tell, and this is where also you need to unlearn every time you make a step, and maybe that's a good learning for everyone if they are at this stage. I think it's good to kind of leverage on your experience, but not overdo it. I remember the very first task I had in this job was to find an office, like as simple as like just find a physical place where we're gonna start hiring the people. And I went into like the consulting mode, like I did all the possible benchmarks in the world. I went and visited all these places. It took me like a long time, and I had like a very detailed report I was so proud of. And then I came in and shared it with my manager back then, and she looked at me and like, what the fuck is that? Like, how much time did this take you? And I think it took me by storm. I realized that actually I probably overdid it like exponentially here. And this is where like it was good that I had this experience very early on in that role, because it made me realize that sometimes you need to go that deep because the topic requires it, and sometimes you just need to start making better decisions based on intuition, based on common sense, based on first principles. And I think this is where with experience you start also learning how to do better decision making. And sometimes you need the data, you need everything like in place. And sometimes you just need to go with the flow, because it doesn't matter, like even if you're not in the right location, you could move, like it's not the end of the world. So I don't know if this answers your question. Like, I think like this is the first thing that came to mind when it comes to sharing. But in general, like I spent 5 years in this company, and then another around 4 years at Talabat at the next stage. So from country development manager to country manager to general manager to then senior director for quick commerce in the UAE. And it's very difficult to kind of pinpoint like one learning. But for me, when you start getting these roles, it stops being about you alone, because you can't do all of this alone. And it starts becoming a team effort. Right. And I always describe, whenever someone asks me, or someone outside of the industry, they don't even know what a GM means, they'd ask me, what do you do? I say 50% of my job is like business, like it's basically growing the business, scaling the business, doing whatever the business needs. And 50% is people. And if you don't have that other 50% on your own, you can't do much, And I think this is something also I learned with a lot of experience on how you can, like what is at least my own leadership style, and how can I make sure that you rally people around you so that they can actually help you move in the right direction.
Let's talk about that, the leadership style, and how did you then grow in your career? Those things, I find it fascinating. So you took on the role as regional manager, you said?
Yeah, like a country development manager. This was
correct, until you became a general manager. But yeah, it's super detail oriented. You had to learn how to manage people, which is something that, I don't think the word is manage people, but how to lead, right? That's very hard. And that's something that Gustavo and I like building Evolve. Like, we don't have funds, so we need to encourage people to co-create. And it just feels some people are like they're different incentives, different people. So let's talk about that, John. Like that journey, I find that fascinating. If you could.
Yeah, of course. Look, I think again, like, I don't think there's an absolute leadership style that everyone should follow. I think like a very theoretical comment I can make here is, as long as you're authentic to yourself, you're probably a good leader. And that I learned with years. And the moment you start trying to become someone else or trying to play a role at work, then you're not authentic, then people feel it, and then you lose a lot of the impact that you have. That's like at a very high level. Now, if I go back to my experience, I think I learned a lot by doing and testing and failing. And, like, it wasn't that, of course, I took a lot of courses. I was fortunate that I was working in companies that invest a lot in like learning and development. So I got exposed to a lot of trainings, but then by the end of the day, where you learn the most is on the job. What I ended up having like as a clear philosophy after all the years of leading teams, from just a few team members to at Talabat, when I left, it was around 700, 800 people across, the organization. So it was quite a large team and super diverse, from directors to storekeepers, basically. I really believe in positive leadership. And positive leadership can mean so many different things. For me, it means making sure that the people that you're working with understand the big picture, right? Because you could actually say it's a loss of time. It will take me a lot of time. Let me just be, give them top-down instruction. Everyone will do it. It will cascade down into the organization, and work will be done. But if you do that, I think people lose the purpose of what they're doing, lose the meaning. So I've always been very fond on investing the right amount of time, communicating, doing town halls, doing all hands meeting, where I share the strategy, I share where we're going, I share the challenges of the business, I share numbers, and I ask the team and I tell them that I trust you, that these numbers should not, like sometimes a bit of sensitive numbers that we usually don't always share with everyone. But I always felt that this actually gave the sense of what they're doing, right? So when you've been given a task, if you're just doing the task, you'll probably do it. Maybe you don't do it great, but then you don't understand how does it contribute to something else. When they understand what the company is trying to do, what are the challenges, and why this task makes sense, then like suddenly it becomes a very different dimension, and they feel that they're actually contributing to something bigger. They feel that they have an impact, and I believe this plays a lot in the motivation of people. So that's one thing. Another thing is, I think I learned this also with the years, is the approach of the recognition topic, because especially in corporate cultures, I think we have a fear of recognition. I think a lot of leaders think that the moment you recognize someone, they will stop trying, as if they just hit the finish line and they'll just start relaxing. And I always refuse to believe that. And with like, what I saw is every time you recognize someone, and it also happened with me, every time I got recognized, I just wanted to give more, not less. And I feel that recognition fuels that motivation. With most of people, when they recognize, they feel seen, they feel heard, they feel appreciated. I think that triggers a much bigger motivation to do more. So a big fund of recognition publicly when possible, like I think there's much more benefit than harm in doing so. Of course, not like always celebrating all the time, every day, every second. I'm not saying that, but just like taking time to recognize people who are doing a great job. And maybe last thing, setting high expectations. I think this is how I operate. I set like the bar high for myself, and I also set the bar high for the team, but in a very supportive way. So basically, I always like to challenge people, to push them a bit out of their comfort zone, to give them assignments sometimes out of their scope, because I believe that this is where growth happens, when you're really pushing yourself out of this zone that you really know. But there are two ways of doing so. You can do it and almost, like challenging hardly, and then leaving them alone. And if they fail, they fail. And like that's how you see if they're doing a good job. Or you can do it in a very supportive way. And this is the way I always lean towards, which is I'll give you a challenge, but I'll also give you all the means to succeed. Because if you succeed, the company succeeds, I succeed, it's all win-win. And if you fail, we all fail together. So, I mean, maybe these are like different things, but together they kind of are the ingredients that worked for me, at least, to develop a leadership style that I enjoyed, at least.
Can you possibly share a little bit about then, because in when you have that conviction as you have, which I very much agree on with the challenging and moving out of comfort zone, but you will have people that will fail. You will have people that even though you give them the means to succeed and you support them, stuff like that, then they will not achieve whatever's out the comfort zone. Can you share a little bit about how do you then handle that, and how do you make sure that people stay motivated when that doesn't happen? Because this is when it becomes difficult. So yeah. Can you share some experiences with that?
Yeah, I can for sure. And I think there are two scenarios here. There's someone who's supposed to do their job and they're not doing great. And I think like I can talk a bit about like how do you deal with this? Because by the end of the day, as a leader, you also need to be fair to the business, and you can't just tolerate, like average or below average performance. I think like this is one scenario, but there's the other scenario where the person didn't ask necessarily, like you just come and throw a task or throw a challenge on them because this is how you want to grow them, and they might fail. It happened a lot of times. Maybe two things come to mind. First is that usually, because I say like I do it in a very supportive way, I don't just throw the challenge and then check in 3 months later to see if the person did well, and then potentially we might discover that they failed. It's more of a like there's regular checkups that I usually do, like very like specific touch points that are there to make sure that things are also progressing, not only for the person, like to be honest, also for the business, because most of the time, not most of the time, all the time, these are real projects. They're not like fake challenges that are given. By the end of the day, there's a business to run, right? So these are real challenges. So we need to make sure that the business is evolving. So I would say maybe don't wait too long before you do a check-in, before you check if if things are going in the right direction. I believe if there are like these smaller check-ins, more regular, I think this is where you can quickly realize if it's going in the right direction. You can try to steer it, and you can basically control the damage for the business, but also for the person, to avoid being in a situation like you described, where like that person who didn't ask for much ended up I don't know, not succeeding in this role and being very demotivated. The second dimension depends also on the seniority. If it's not a very senior person, I would usually pair them with a mentor or a more senior person, if I don't have the time to actually do that close follow-up, to actually make sure that they have the right guidance from someone else. So as they're trying to achieve that challenge or to hit that challenge, they're also learning. And that's a big part of why this challenge has been given to start with, like just making sure that they learn. Yeah, I think these are the things that's coming to mind when it comes to this topic.
Thank you.
Thanks. And I will share a personal story that we are going through, Gustavo and I, with a client, which is quite interesting because we started with this client, and the contract was one, like to build an advisory board, blah blah blah. But as we progressed, they changed leadership. There's a new CEO, and they changed the target. So we were focusing in one specific industry, and now we have a completely new industry, which is out of our league. But we said, okay, we have to. We have a contract, got the first part of the payment, and now we need to go about that as well. But it is challenging. Like now I understand why recruitment is so difficult, because they want a very specific profile. So today, yesterday we had a call, presented this potential advisory board candidate for them, and I think there's so many nuances there. Like they're from the US, so it seems like that the guy is happy when they're talking. Like it's amazing, your profiles, and then I'm like, great, it went great. And so we got a message today saying not the right profile. I was like, sorry guys, pardon my French. So what, so I and this happened a few times now. So what I told Gustavo is like, hey man, let's just realign. It's the payment is important, but it's not the payment. It's like, I think it's about communicating to the client and being proactive in that sense, so we don't have our ass kicked in the first place, but also to show them that we want to show that we are their partners. But maybe this is not the right scope, so for us. But we have to be proactive in the sense of communicating that this is not working the way we are working until now, and maybe we can create other alternatives. And if it doesn't work, fair enough, but they changed as well. So what I'm taking away here, so first, I would love if you could give us give me a feedback on this approach. I would greatly appreciate that. But what I'm taking away from what you just said, that is communication is super important, whether you're leading your company. So where you're going, right? Where you're going. Recognition, totally agree. And setting high expectations on that note, I agree. But sometimes, like I'm looking at Evolve also, you have to set the bar high. It is scary, but and then how you get there, and then you have to break down those goals, and so it's kind of like as an entrepreneur trying to build Evolve here, it's really challenging that bit. But on the first part of my question, maybe if you could give us a feedback, and how to go about these situations.
Yeah. Look, honestly, like I think you said it, like the communication is key in these cases. And I think communication is always like I always say this, like I'd rather over communicate than under communicate in these situations. Because then like there's like, if you said things twice or three times, there's much less risk than not saying it at all, right? And to your case specifically, I think maybe I don't know, like, did he just leave? He didn't like what I said?
You didn't like what you said, exactly.
I think his computer is a bit
well, it's being recorded, so he can probably hear the answer still. So
the stuff was here as well.
Please.
Here you go. We just said maybe you didn't like what I was saying.
You're muted.
You're on mute.
Over communicating. I got that. We'll do that for sure.
That's 100%. It. Done. No, I was saying in the scenario that you were sharing, honestly, I'm not in a position to give like an advice but I think sometimes you just need to be to what you said, like maybe there's fit on like working together, but not on specifically that scope. So I think sometimes like just being very real with whoever partner you're working with, be it a client or an employee or like a team member or a manager, just like say things as they are, like just like be very open. And I think this is easier in certain cultures than others. I know like this is where like when you're a multinational, like the cultural aspect gets into the picture. I see Bérangère nodding, she's in the UK. But yeah, I guess just like, I don't know, like just be open, be honest, and just
Gustavo,
know that
I'll ask you to run just until I fix my internet. I think there's a problem with my internet. Sorry, guys.
No worries.
Okay. So please go.
I was nodding because the situation and the scenario that Carlos shared is something that actually the writer of the book called The Cultural Map have talked a lot about. It's a very good book about this situation. I have it here just to show you this book. Maybe some of you have read it, but it's a very, very good way to try to move out of our own situations and make those difficult situations clear. So I wanted to actually ask you, John, about this international part of your career and your life. Dubai, France, probably the US a little bit different parts. What have you seen? What have seen that were different and that expected or surprised you when you move across all of these different places?
Yeah, I think in general, just like how people approach working relationships is very, very different. In Dubai, Dubai is a melting pot, like you really have like all the nationalities combined in one place. So that team that I was referring to, I probably had, I don't know, between 25 and 30 different nationalities in the team, which in the beginning is extremely challenging to manage because like you really have the spectrum of people who look at work, like work relationship as like you're their friend from day one. And people even 4 years later, they create that barrier, And I mean, I also don't like stereotypes. Obviously, it doesn't apply like blindly to like all the people from that country, but there are trends that you kind of identify. And it's very, like in the beginning, it's very difficult to navigate because then you say the same thing and then people just react to it very differently. So I also learned, and this is like going back to the unlearning part, because before that experience, I worked mainly with homogeneous teams, like in Paris, I was working with mainly French people. I worked a lot with the UK, British people, like all together, but not like that diversity where the same thing can have different impact. I invested in actually trying to understand these cultures. Like one of the initiatives that I implemented that I always like brag about is I implemented that rule where every Friday I take one person out for lunch. And like it's not like my report, like people that I don't really interact with, like, or we have like 2-3 different layers. And this is where I learned the most about like the differences, even within the same country, like India, for example. I'll give that example. I learned that people coming from northern India and southern India are like almost coming from 2 different countries, and they're like really like very clear profiles where northern Indians are like very energetic, very loud, very like very like in your face, where southern Indian are super calm and very chill, and like like they approach things differently. So I really think like the answer is just investing that time in understanding the cultures, doing one-on-one interactions to really get to understand. And then, yeah, I guess maybe tuning down a bit my approach just to make sure that like it doesn't shock anyone, like.
Yeah.
Rebecca, more questions or anyone else?
And I'm good. I was just nodding because I can definitely relate to what you're saying, working in companies where we've had a lot of different nationalities, but especially also with the manager level. I'm just a little bit curious as to, so one thing is your experience connecting, but can you maybe give us a little bit of insights on managing? I seriously, I mean managing, directing different cultures, because you said you don't necessarily want to do stereotypes, but where you have been, especially also where you are now, there is a lot of cultures and management style does vary, and also a lot of cultures are more hierarchical and others are like expecting more delegated authority and stuff like that. How do you navigate that? So one thing is getting to know people, but how do you navigate that in a greater context where you have to have the company moving in the same direction?
Yeah. Like when you were asking your question, one like leadership model came to mind, which partially answers, like address your question, which is, I don't know if you're aware of the situational leadership model, where basically,
My chair just went.
What's happening today?
It broke. My chair broke. Okay, this is live. Sorry.
Yeah, no worries. Like it's nice. Like there's some action here. The situation leadership model came to mind. It doesn't apply to nationalities, but it does apply to the fact that irrespective of the nationalities, you will always end up managing a team of diverse people, and some people would need delegation, while some others will need just like a lot of direction. Some of them just need coaching. So there's the spectrum of like the matrix and all, which I won't get into. But I think in general, whether it's nationality related or person or personality related, I always felt that if you're trying to apply a one-size-fits-all kind of leadership, especially when you're working individually with them, it kind of breaks, and you really need to, like take into account the expectation of the person, but also their level, their skill set, like if they're able to, and adjust a bit your style to make sure that you're moving. Because for me, if you're someone who likes to be delegated and like just tell me what to do and leave me alone, and you prove that you're able to do it, then actually managing you closely won't get you to the results, right? So I actually need to give you space because I know I can trust you and that you can reach that result. While other people, maybe they want space, but they never proved that they're able to do it. And this is where you need to be much more, I wouldn't say micromanagement, because I think we should never micromanage anyone, but just like getting like a closer, like a closer kind of management with them to make sure that things are moving. And I think it also helps you kind of manage your time. Like I think every leader dreams of just being able to have people that you can delegate all the work to and check in with them every week maybe, and that's it. But that's not always the reality, especially also it depends on the task, maybe something new, maybe a new challenge. So I'd say, just adjusting your style to each person. Now, to answer your question on nationalities, I don't know. Honestly, it's difficult. I don't know if I want to put like these boxes, but in general, like at least I can say Europe versus US versus the GCC or the Arab countries. In the Arab countries, there's a lot of pride, and that you need to kind of navigate. And usually people kind of put in that, that wall in the beginning, but then you can actually like break it very quickly if you become a bit more friendly and you start getting interested in the person. In Europe, I think in general, there's this, I don't know, independence kind of thing where people like, in general, again, like, I don't know, like, I don't want again, I don't want to get into the stereotypes, but people are a bit more, I would say, autonomous, independent. They don't like to be like very like guided. Like Indians, for example, or Pakistanis kind of culture, it's almost like you need to be very directive. I'll stop here. I don't know if I'm making sense with all these countries, but I mean, at least this is based on people I worked with.
I completely agree, and I think on the culture note, like again, when you have this folks joining Evolve, right? Like in the US, it's so interesting. It's always money first, and it's my perception, and I'm being, I'm speaking broadly again, but it's typically like it's down to business, very very little small talk, and then in the end, if we have some time, then we we talk we talk about life and so on. Typically that's how the calls go about, like when I'm onboarding someone new in the US, and it's way more perhaps the word is transactional, like it's just I think I mean it's how it is what it is, and so that's how I perceive it. Go Hakan, please.
Well, one comment on that. I think transactional, I would call it efficient for America compared to Scandinavia for sure, where we talk in clues for a very long time, but then get on with it. I guess what I would be interested in, we talked about managing people in different cultures and all of that. Something that I've spent a lot of time thinking about is how regional offices actually have to manage both the local teams and the the head office in terms of both culture and even execution. I've spent most of my career working for American companies, but in Asia, so gives a it has its own flavor, so to say. What have you seen in terms of what are the mistakes that you think that global companies do when they're talking to your region now? So if we talk about the Middle East, and how can you actually improve that flow of information? My example from Asia is that often the head of the region or the head of the country becomes like the hourglass. He filters the information down to the team and he has to filter it upwards. And if he's not there, things tend to go awry quite quickly.
Honestly, I relate a lot to what you said, because in both, before Carlo, which is more of a, like, it's in the region, so I think it's outside of the example that you mentioned, but both OLX Group and Delivery Hero, like the head office is For OLX, it was in South Africa. For Delivery Hero, it was in Germany, and then the operation is around the globe. I relate a lot to what you said, that like the head of the local market becomes almost like that sponge that needs to basically manage down and manage up. Maybe a few things that I observed from my experience dealing with like regional offices is where it breaks the most is when there's a framework that had to be applied everywhere. So you're not taking into account local specificities, you're not taking into account local nuances, and you're just trying to apply the same thing everywhere. And this happened, like I've seen this happening, and this is where it breaks, because I'm not saying that you need to run completely different businesses in every market, because then you're not part of a multinational and there's no value in this. But then you really need to take into account these local nuances. And I'm really talking mainly from a business perspective. I'm not even talking culture and ways of working, which are also important. But even from a business perspective and from a consumer perspective, things are very different. I'll give you a very practical example. Delivery Hero is a delivery company, and the delivery the delivery behavior of people in Germany, for example, or in Europe is very, very different than the behavior that you have here in the Middle East, for example. Right here in the Middle East, everything is delivered to your doorstep, like, and it's completely fine, you know, like you order anything and it gets delivered here. The business that I was running was quick commerce, which is even faster. You order, and in 20 minutes you get that delivered to your doorstep. The first pilot started in Berlin for that concept, and it failed very quickly because that's not a model that works in Europe. You know, like people don't, like they don't necessarily need their things delivered that fast. You have the commerce around you much more accessibly than in other regions. People are much more environmental conscious, so even they look at these things and they judge that like that motorbike or whatever you're using to transport is like basically polluting a lot. So there are a lot of consideration that would make this model fail. And if it was only about trying to apply the learnings from Europe, applying it across the world, I think the quick commerce trend would have never picked up in the world. But then what happened in that case, on the positive side, is that very quickly UAE became the hub for experimenting things. And then we started seeing completely different trends, you know, like it picked up so fast, and then COVID happened at the same time. So it helped obviously a lot everywhere. But then the consumer behavior in these markets were very different, and they proved the model, and then the model started expanding everywhere else. So maybe just an example, I don't know if it's the most relevant, but this is what came to mind in terms of really adjusting, taking into account the local specificities, rather than applying like one size fits all kind of approach.
No, I would agree with that. I guess my question comes more, how do you get the team on board on this? You know, one thing that you hear a lot in Japan, for example, is we want to roll out this thing, this is how we want to do it, and we want to have it done in 3 months. The Japan office will take longer to get started because everybody needs to understand, what are we doing? How are we doing? What are the steps? All of that needs to be done first. So they will be slow. And if you then have a head office in, you know, Frankfurt or in the US, they will say, well, it's taking too long. And how have you found this explaining to head office really that this is how do you convince them without having the proof that, okay, this is going to take us longer, but if I get the buy-in, I will actually be able to run faster later on. I'm not sure if my question makes sense.
Yeah, no, I get your question. I'm just trying to remember, like to see if I was exposed to something like that. I don't think so. So I don't know if I'm the most like relevant person. Maybe someone else in the room has had like a better experience in that.
Well, I can weigh in, but that will be for more from, when you have head office policies or you have something that you want to be like global coverage. So that is always a difficult thing. Let's just take my people and culture or HR hat on, say that everybody wants to have succession planning or something like that. And so in general, and I wish I had a business related example because my brain was looking for that, but I don't, but I have more of an HR example. It's always, the thing is always, you spoke earlier, John, about the bigger picture. So why does this create value for the bigger company? But that's not enough locally, because you also need to show why does that create value for me? And that will always be the challenge, to basically apply it into the local context. So Hakan?
Yeah.
Yeah. Whoa. I
Wow.
won, Carlos.
It's Håkan. It's Håkan, but let's Hakan work fine.
Håkan. I mean, jag får inte säga Håkan. So, but anyways, so it's not about convincing. It's about displaying and showing, and what also adapting into the context. So you say, well, in Japan, you use Japan as an example. My first thought would be like, I had to implement succession planning in Korea in one of my companies. And for them, they were like, but we're just a satellite. We're just moved here, and we're just based here. And then you had to display how their succession tapped into the greater succession before you could do that. But also understanding and asking questions about, okay, so why is there this resistance? So what is it you're reacting to? So it's about understanding and basically also adapting to the local context, because just pressing things down on top, that will never succeed unless you can show the value it creates in the local context.
Yeah, no,
I don't know
agree.
if I'm making sense. So
no, you're making sense. I think I guess where I'm coming from is I am constantly surprised how little time is actually spent on that understanding part from a head office perspective. And interestingly enough, I did a research paper recently. The feedback from APAC was that European companies were actually worse at it than American companies. And I was very surprised to hear that, but there was a sense of American companies will come in and try to shove something down your throat, but then you just have to push back and talk to them, while the European mindset often was, well, this has worked for us here, so it should work everywhere, because you had tested it in a couple of different countries or something. I'm not saying that that's been my experience, but that was the feedback that I got, which I was quite taken aback about.
Actually, because we were talking about Erin Meyer's book in the chat, there is a little bit from Erin Meyer's that could help here. Håkan, is the fact that she said that American working culture is very explicit, because there is a lot of actually differences within US as well. You have to be very explicit, and one of the examples she takes is that you have to say what you will say, then you say it again at the end of the meeting. While different company in Europe is a bit different, but the UK especially is very much implicit, like Japan as well, in terms of, because in island country, a lot of things are in the air. And that might explain then the difference here in terms of being explicit, the European and American policy. Then you just say, okay, we have a problem with it, which is why this and this and this, and then having a discussion. And then being able to have to come to a better point, while Europe might just have difficulty to understand what the problem is, because there is not as explicit or trying to be as explicit as the American working culture. This is just based on what I've read in this book. I'm not saying that I've seen that, but I think one of the things that is interesting in all of this discussion is the time that you talk about this, the time that you spend to try to understand the others. And one of the things that I'm thinking from this discussion that we have around, imagine if it is as hard as that internally to understand your employees, how hard it is to understand your customer. And so the time that you spend to actually think about how you make better sense of the different culture, internally, is very important as well externally, to be sure that you have the right product for the right people and the right customer in the right place.
I was actually, I took it one time further. I noted down here because we've just been sitting here talking a little bit about stereotypes and understanding in different cultures and stuff like that. And sometimes it helps boxing things in to basically be able to be more direct about it and understand. But I also think that this is something that this community actually can do if we are more explicit about what is our experiences also, but also not boxing it in, but opening it up for understanding. So in general, there is stereotypes and we do have experience working across, but also in general, when more nationalities come in, maybe it could be an idea to, I don't know, set up a space where people from these different nationalities can say, well, my experience being one from there is this will help me understand somebody better. And that is both from an internal point of view, but also, as you said, from a customer point of view. So sitting in the middle of, I don't know, Korea, this is my experience, this is what we need, because that is basically what we need to break through to the different markets. And this is actually what Evolve is all about, right?
Mhm.
Or part of it anyway.
Exactly. Yeah, that part of it, but yeah, well said. Thank you all. We have to actually the session topic was to talk about crossroads. So let's try to touch that before we finished. So John, if we can move on and speak about your personal crossroad that led you to become a coach. When we met you, like you were starting in this journey, and now you've done the course. You have quite a few coaches, and you're also a chief of staff, which is quite cool, right? So you have the privilege of being a chief of staff to the CEO or general manager. You've been on that chair, so there's probably you could talk a little bit about that, why you decided to become a chief of staff, and your crossroads, your work as a coach, and tell us all about that.
I'll try to cover this very quickly. I'll start with the chief of staff part. Like, I'm chief of staff of the CEO. I was not the CEO before, just to put things into perspective. So it's not exactly the same. But so just my transition out of, so I was there in the quick commerce space. Quick commerce is a very innovative space, very new back then. Spent almost 4 years, enjoyed my time a lot. At some point, I was feeling something's awkward. I didn't know what was going wrong. And actually, I had the chance to be working with a coach, or I was being coached. And working with that coach helped me answer a lot of questions. So I think this actually made me make my career change, and at the same time wanting to become a coach. So like it's that experience together. What was happening there is that she made me realize with the work that we've done and just a lot of introspection and self-discovery, that I was actually trying to become someone else. Simply said, like in simple words, I was losing my authenticity, and I was trying to mimic the C-level of that company I was working at. And it happened that they have a completely different style. And I caught myself, or actually through the work, I realized that why I was feeling awkward is that I was trying to be applying a different style, and that style is more about, it might shock some people, like management by fear, shouting in meetings, being very directive. And I caught myself, I'm very calm, and I usually consider this as a big strength for me. And I caught myself sometimes just reacting on the spot, being rude, just talking badly to people. And I realized that all I was doing is trying to mimic, trying to just become like them, because that's the only path I saw for my progression. I wanted to become the COO, and I was trying to become him as a person. So I was losing my authenticity, and this was a big realization for me. Like I was at this stage of my career where I started looking for purpose, I started looking for meaning, and I wanted to make sure that I was actually myself. And through the coaching work that I've done, which was supposed to be like a leadership program at my company, ended up being me resigning from the company, which is not the best use case for in general coaching. So my coach always tell me, please stop telling that story to everyone. But basically, yeah, like I just realized that, my purpose and my life purpose, the way I was able to label it in the coaching, is all about helping people embrace their power. And it then became very obvious that in that setup, in that company, I wasn't allowed to do this anymore, right? Like they were expecting something else from me, and it doesn't align with my values. It doesn't align with my purpose. So I just, like, it was my basically signal to make the move. So very different than my move from consulting into, like that move was driven by growth and impact and career. This move is more driven by purpose and meaning and fulfillment. So I knew that leaving that company will come with a price. Like I was managing a very big business, $250 million in turnaround. Like that was like the thing that I wanted to do in my career. But it wasn't the most important factor anymore. So I was fortunate enough that at the same time I came across Kalo, which is the company I currently work at. And it ticked a lot of boxes. I met people, and I really genuinely felt that I can share a lot of values with these people. I love the business. You're making healthy easy. So like you're creating impact on a daily basis. And I just felt that like I can express my authentic self there in this company. So this was the move. And then the chief of staff role, it happened a bit coincidentally. I don't know if this is a word. But what caught my eye first was Kalo as a company, and the role that was open was chief of staff. And then I read that job description. I was like, oh, wow. Like that's everything that I like to do. I felt that this was the perfect combination between a consultant and an operator. It had the good side, or at least the good sides for me, the things I enjoyed in consulting, the things I enjoy in being an operator, a general manager, putting them together into a role. So this is what led me mainly to move to that opportunity today. Like it's been almost 2 years. I really think it's that intersection that fulfills me. They call me the glue in the company as a chief of staff, because you kind of bring all the pieces together, and I just feel like it aligns perfectly with my purpose one more time, and I think this is what today, that fulfillment that I have towards that role, is because it fits my purpose, it aligns with my values, and these things became very important for me at this stage. And so this is on the chief of staff part. The coaching. So after that transformation that I had with the coach, I was extremely curious to say, okay, now you know what? Like I've had this experience. Now I want to go and do the same with others. And this is what led me to take the whole training. It was almost 2 years. It's a very long training. Like it's the real thing, not like the 5-minute online live coaching thing. But it was a very long process, super meaningful, very, very fulfilling to actually be witnessing actually that transformation in people in return, like just giving back. And this is what I do today. This is a parallel career. I only coach at night, 9 p.m., in the morning, super early, over the weekends, because it's not something like I still have my full-time job. So it's more of a parallel career for now, until I feel that I can do it full-time, financially, which might take a lot of time. And yeah, like I even went and triggered some opportunities to coach people internally, just to give back also to that company that was very open with me, just advertising myself as a coach. Today, if you go to my LinkedIn, you'll see that I have 2 roles, one in Kalo, one in my own company as a coach. On social media, I have that account called the Alignment Movement that I created, where I do these videos that Carlos was referring to. and they're completely fine with it. And I think like this also tells a lot about the culture, where they give you that space because they believe, and that's what I enjoy a lot about the culture of this company. If you're fulfilled as a professional, as a person, you'll give more at your job. And I think that applies to a lot of people. A lot of people are like dancing coaches on the side, or like they're board members, some of them, like depending on the level, like they do a lot of side activities, and the company's fine with it because like it just adds, like more and more passion to the person. I'll stop here, maybe ask, I don't know if you have follow-up questions around any other, because I can talk for 3 hours on this topic, but maybe let's make it more specific. We still don't have a lot.
Yeah, I'll let the community, I mean, it's up to you guys, please.
Questions?
Come on.
I think the chief of staff title that you have is a great title. I think the way you describe the role is how I understand it. I don't think that many organizations totally understand the role.
No. Yeah. So your question is, you want to understand the role? Is this your
Well,
question?
no, I understand it. I just think how come that this company really understood that this is what we need?
Yeah. Look, it's a really good observation, because I think this is one of the most non-understood roles that exist, and it's relatively new. Like we recently started hearing about chief of staff in business. We mainly, like historically, it was more in like politics and military, where you have chief of staffs forever, But then I think it started in Silicon Valley, where a lot of tech companies starting seeing the value, and now it's spreading, in very different organizations. The founder that created the Calo is very much like spent time in Silicon Valley, is very much inspired by all these models, and I think this was a big inspiration for him. There's this entrepreneur and like researcher called Matt Mokari. And Matt Mokari, or Mochari, I don't know how it's pronounced, he actually talks a lot about the chief of staff role, and he even developed some frameworks that he shares with CEOs. He's also a coach, and his condition to coach CEOs is the only condition for him to accept a CEO is if they have a chief of staff, because he really sees how this is a role that is an extension of the CEO, and that really like kind of multiplies the power of a CEO in terms of like impact. So yeah, I guess like in that case specifically, in Carlos' case, I think it was really like a US influence, because the founder spent a lot of time there. And I'm taking on a real challenge to actually be an advocate of this role in the region, because a lot of people don't understand it. So on LinkedIn, I'm very active. I post a lot about it. I create some infographics, because I believe it's on us now to actually make people know what this role is about, and make actually founders and CEOs know that this role can actually really multiply their impact in the company, because they can really focus on, like on the strategy, on the direction, on the high level, and keep the execution in the hands of someone who can really like move the needle and execute. And just to add one last thing on the role, it has different levels in different companies as well. Really, like I think if you talk to chief of staff in any company, they can be doing very different things. Some chief of staffs are very junior, like they've done 3 years of consulting and they join and they're almost like a mini project manager. And then you can go up in the ladder to hire someone who had like real leadership experience and who can have a real influence in the room, because we call it like the subtle influence, or the silent influence role, because you have a lot of influence if your principal gives you that influence. So if your CEO or the person you're chief of staff to gives you that influence, and also if you have the experience that make you legitimate to actually be in a room and share your opinion, rather than just being in a room and taking notes and sharing meeting updates. I think both exist today in the world, and they're just like different levels of that role.
Thank you.
Maybe one thing from me, John, as a wrap up, or as the last thought, I'm also coming from consulting, and so I really do like the kind of golden thread. You start in consulting, then you move in-house as GM or P&L with P&L responsibility, which is hard, in terms of sometimes to make this switch. Then you're back into chief of staff role, which is, more as a and then coach. So there is quite a nice progression or journey through that. And I maybe just say what your reflection on this for the moment, and how you put that together.
Honestly, yeah, like I think it's like I really look at this role as like bringing together like all the aspects that I enjoyed in my previous, like in my previous roles, and I think I'm able to really create impact in the company I work at because of my experience. And there's a reality of from day one when people look at your profile, they take you seriously if you've operated. Like now I work with the GMs and I share a lot of experience with them, and they take it seriously because they know you've done it, right? So yeah, like I really enjoy it today. I discovered this role like almost by mistake, but then today, if you ask me, like it's exactly what I want to do. And interestingly enough, and that's like my case, is that I've had opportunity at Calo to jump on another role because we had the COO who just came for a few months, didn't work out, left. And I had the golden opportunity to jump on that role and say, okay, wow, COO, like it's flashy. And I did not. And I even had a conversation with the CEO saying, John, like the seat is empty. And I didn't want to, just because I'm deeply convinced today that this is my sweet spot. And this is what I'd rather be because it fulfills me, and it doesn't necessarily is like the nicest thing to say again over a dinner. And that links back to my first answer. Because I did P&L management for a long time, and I was fortunate to be able to be exposed to that type of, like roles, but I didn't want to go back to it very, like just yet, at least. Who knows what happens, So like what I'm trying to share here is really like at some point in our career, it really becomes more about our personal fulfillment and what really want to do, rather than what sounds nice or what will make my CV better or what would people say or think.
Just wrapping that up a little bit, because I already at the start noticed you said this isn't a nice thing to say at the dinner. So we talk about what's the price of this. So do you think that people would like, let's say you want to change tracks, you just said you didn't want to, but did this damage your CV or did this grow your CV, your resume? Because I see it quite differently than the way you describe it. But so
yeah,
I'm just curious.
Yeah,
no,
no,
down to that.
No, it doesn't destroy my CV at all. I think I was mainly referring to how some conventional people would look at it, like just like in the career ladder, after a GM, usually you would go into like CBO, Chief Business Officer, COO, then CEO, right? Like the Chief of Staff is kind of like a branch out. But honestly, today, like in dinner time, like I do enjoy talking about it a lot, especially that a lot of people look at me with these eyes of like, I have no clue what you're talking about. I think that brings a lot of spiciness also to the discussion, because you're also bringing, like a new aspect to it. So no, personally, I don't see it as a step down at all. I'm just referring to it as more of like, I don't know, the conventional path,
Thank you.
All right. We'll have to wrap up. So John, perhaps we have the course which is available, and we spoke about it. I'll give you, if you're okay, give the community access so they can
For
see
sure.
that. It's really cool. But John, if people want to know more about you also, because we're gonna divulge this outside of the community. John is in the WhatsApp community as well, as I said, first thing in the call. But yeah, what's the best way to reach you and to know more about your work?
Yeah, look, I'm very active on LinkedIn and Instagram. So on LinkedIn, it's my name. So I'm very reactive there. And then on Instagram, as I mentioned, I have an account called the Alignment Movement, and that's a movement I created a few months back with the big ambition of inspiring 1 million people to live a more aligned life and make these conscious choices. I'm at 5,000 so far, so I'm at like 0.5% of my target. But in a few months, which is great. I'm very happy with, like, I'm very patient with the progress. But yeah, like this is also another place where you could find me, obviously on the WhatsApp channel, and then john@moveforwardhub.com in case you prefer email.
Very cool. John, thank you so much, man. It was amazing. Thank you all for, well, another week, and I'll see you all next week. Thanks.
Thank
Have a
you.
good one.
Pleasure to be here.
Bye-bye.
Bye.